Thunderstone is a game that I like very much, although at this point probably I should say a game system more than a single game. I followed the Thunderstone line from the beginning. Thunderstone came out in the early days of the deck building genre, and at the time deck building was interesting mechanically but pretty bland thematically. And Thunderstone added the fun of adventure, of questing, of slaying monsters, of getting treasures. So that it made deck building very exciting. And then also throughout the years, it constantly improved from the basic Thunderstone. Then they added expansions that also were organized as scenarios. They were building a story. That was another new idea in deck building. Then we had Thunderstone Advance, great improvement. Then we had an expansion that brought cooperative gameplay. Probably most of my reviews of Thunderstone products, I ended with something like, and this is the best Thunderstone set to date. And that's great because the series kept improving. So it is with great excitement that I learned about the existence of a new Thunderstone set. We hadn't had a set or a reboot of the game in a while, and now we have Thunderstone Quest, a new iteration of the system. Definitely the single biggest box to date. I hope I don't hurt my back. This is how thick the box is, and this is the front. It's a huge box. As for the number of cards that you have, probably corresponds to one of the original sets plus at least 3-4 expansions altogether. Plus you have more of a board feel to it. You don't just have a board that you use to organize the cards, but actually there is a separate play area that represents the dungeon, and that is also why the box is not just so big but also so heavy. Definitely the most ambitious Thunderstone set to date, and one that changes gameplay fairly considerably in a variety of ways. Without further ado, let me show you how Thunderstone Quest works. This is a deck building game, so you start the game with a thin and weak deck, and then you will purchase cards during the game. You'll add them to your discard pile when it's time to reshuffle, so the cards that you bought go back in your main deck, and this way your deck improves over time. This is your starting deck with adventurers, daggers, thunderstones, and lanterns. Now, as for the iconography on the cards, this is the number of attack points that a card produces. That is in close combat / melee or regular combat. This is for magic combat. Usually you can combine the two types of combat unless there are monsters that, say, have an immunity or particularly strong defense against one type or the other. Under that, you have the skill that a character that can inflict damage possesses, and that is the maximum number of difficulty points or skill points of the weapons that the character can use. For example, since this adventurer has a skill of 2, you could equip this weapon to him, but you could not equip this weapon here because in this case the difficulty or skill of the weapon exceeds that of the character, unless of course you find things that modify that. Now that character can, with a 2 + 2, 4, so that's a bonus in skill, could use this weapon and now would have an attack total of 3. Then we have these coins here. This is the number of coins that the card produces. Each turn you will be able to spend the total number of coins that you see on your cards, on the hand that you have for that turn. If you go to the village to buy cards, we'll talk about that in a minute. Another important icon is this one, light points, which you need to produce to go to the dungeon. And then of course you have all sort of effects that are described on the cards. Each player has a personal player's board, such as this one. The player's board has a nice player aid here with the various phases of the turn. You have an area for your player deck, discard pile, an area where you will store your experience point tokens that you collect during the game, another area where you can place potions, bread, and lanterns. These are tokens that you can acquire during the game. But most importantly, you will store wound tokens on this track here. When you take wounds, you place tokens there corresponding to the number of wounds that you took, and you start placing them on the spaces on this track from left to right. The leftmost visible number indicates the number of cards that you draw at the end of your turn. So basically you start with a hand of 6 cards, but as you take ones, your ability to draw cards is reduced. And this is a very interesting element of the design. Then it changes the timing and the pace. Attacking monsters several times in a row becomes complicated because you will take wounds as you do so, and that will reduce your hand of cards. And since cards is what you need to do anything, well, that is a pretty steep penalty. But let's see how you can remove those wounds and how you can actually use your other resources to do things in the game. This is the main play area. As you can see, it comprises a main board that represents the village, and you use it to organize your tokens and the cards that are available for purchase. And then we have a dungeon. The dungeon is modular. You build it using tiles that represent different rooms, different locations, and so you can combine them in very different ways. A lot of variety there. You have an area there, the entrance to the dungeon, the wilderness, where you also store your wound tokens, where you place a guardian card. We'll talk about that later. What's important is that at the beginning of your turn, you will decide where your character goes. Each player has a miniature that will be used to mark the actual physical location of their hero. There are 4 miniatures. These are 2 of them, just to give you a sense. So you will place your miniature wherever your character goes. If you go to the village, you can choose to go to one of the available locations: the Shop of Arcane Wonders, the Temple, the Guild Quarters, the Bazaar. There is a range of actions that you can always take in the village regardless of where you are, plus there are specific advantages based on the location that you chose. Or you can choose to go to the dungeon, in which case you'll start from the wilderness and then you will move from room to room, paying light costs represented on the dungeon tiles and fighting the monster in the room in which you decide to stop. Now, let's take a closer look at the village. When you go to the village, you can heal a wound, and that's very important for reasons that we showed earlier. You can buy a card here from the marketplace, and here you will have a selection of spells, weapons, items, and that changes from game to game. Of course, you can choose a scenario that will tell you how to set up the marketplace and pretty much everything else, or you can do it randomly, or you can just select whatever combination you want. And I did this kind of like randomly. As you can see, you may buy items that will give you coins, will heal you, will produce attack points, will give you all sorts of effects, so that is neat. You can also level up a hero or buy a hero. So the heroes that you acquire during the game, the heroes that you will place during the game, are available here from the Guild's Quarter, and they are stacked based on the level. This number here is the level, so you stack them with the level 1 on top, level 2, and level 3 at the bottom. What happens is that you can spend, this is the cost for the heroes, but for any card that you want to acquire, the cost is in the bottom right corner. So you can spend gold to simply purchase the hero on top of one of the hero stacks, and you add that to your discard pile, will come in your hand later. Or you can choose to spend experience points that you will acquire during the game to level up your heroes. Basically, to level up a hero, the cost is the current level of the hero that you're leveling up plus 2. For example, this is 0, so I spend 2 experience points, 0 plus 2, I paid the cost, and I can take any level 1 hero. So that mysterious adventurer can actually turn into a man or a woman, an elf or a dwarf, a very fluid identity here. And decide, for example, to upgrade that guy into this guy. If I want to level this one later, then I'll need to spend 3. That is 1 plus 2. And so in this case, I'll go through the deck, I'll get the next level. I will destroy, which simply means discarded for good, These days with legacy games where you destroy components, better to specify. So you remove from the game that card, because now this character has effectively become this other guy. So two ways of upgrading your characters. Buying one, well, one way to upgrade, but two ways to acquire. To buy one or to upgrade one. Usually you can buy a single item from the marketplace and you can level up a single hero. Now, as for specific locations on the board, if you go to the bazaar, on top of buying a card from the marketplace, you can also buy one of these tokens for the cost indicated here. Iron Rations will give you extra skill, that is the ability to wield stronger weapons when you attach them to your heroes, or you can turn that into a coin. I mean, you can trade that back for a coin, which is a way of storing coins from one turn to the other, by the way. Lantern, each lantern will give you a light point, and potions, by discarding a potion, you will heal a wound. Very useful. The guild's quarter, if you get there, then you can level up 2 heroes that turn instead of 1. If you go to the temple, you will immediately place cards from your hand on top of your deck, so you will receive them next turn when you draw at the end of your turn. In Thunderstone Advanced, that was called Prepare. It is the Prepare action. However, and also get to heal an extra wound. In town, in the village, you usually heal 1 wound. This way, if you go to the temple, you heal 2. But the penalty for doing these 2 awesome things is that you cannot level up heroes in that turn, and you cannot enter the dungeon, because usually you have to choose the village or the dungeon, but there are game effects that will let you take a dungeon turn after the village turn. With the temple, no such chaining of effects. The Shop of Arcane Wonders, when you buy cards, you may also spend 10 coins to buy the top of the treasure deck. So you don't know what you get, but these are very powerful cards, very good things. They may give you shards, they may be extra heroes that now join your parties, weapons, spells, really good stuff. So this is what you do many times in the game to acquire new resources and strengthen your deck. But the reason why you do so is because at the end, ultimately, you want to go down the dungeon. The dungeon is divided in several levels. Each level has a deck of cards with monsters of different levels of strength. Like these are monsters level 1, level 2, level 3. When a monster is defeated, you take a monster from the deck of that level to replace it. As we said, you start from the wilderness, where you have this generic monster here that can always be defeated, the giant rat. And as you can see, it's not that hard to defeat, doesn't have any special weapons. And after you do so, as a reward, you may level up any of your 0 heroes into an adventurer, into a level 1 hero, ignoring the cost. So this is a great way for you to get rid of your adventurers quickly, those initial heroes that as soon as you start getting a good deck, they become a nuisance. This game allows you to flush them out of your deck quite easily. So you will need to be able to attack a monster to show that you have enough light points to reach the room of the monster that you want to attack. As you can see, the rooms from these open doors are adjacent to one another orthogonally. For example, this is 0 light points, this is 0 light points, this is 1 light point. So to get there, I need a single light point. And then I can attack the monster that is there. Different rooms will have different effects that may apply before or after the battle. You simply read the room and do what it says, or take into account what it says. Then the monsters themselves will have possibly before the battle effects, after the battle effects. There's the number of their strength that you need to match or exceed with your attack points. They may have resistance. For example, this little number here is resistance to physical attacks. Others may have resistance to magic. Yes, you put together pretty much the defenses of the monster itself and the room in which the monster is. If you're able to do that, that is to meet or exceed their attack, the defense value, you destroy the monster, you get whatever is the advantage, there is the reward, it may be printed on the card, the room may have rewards. For example, here, this always gives you a lantern, because it is in that room, you're going to get 2 lanterns for defeating that one. Also 3 experience points, as indicated there. However, after you do that, you also take damage. At the end of combat, you take damage, which is printed in the bottom left corner of the cards. And again, you may have to add together the damage from the monsters, and this gives you a card, negative cards you place in your deck, but you may have to put together the damage from the monsters and the damage from the room, also like in this case, 3 wounds, so that's annoying, So you will go there, attack, collect rewards, then go to the village, heal, and come back and do that as efficiently as possible. When a monster is defeated, you take a card from the corresponding deck to replace it. Now, there are some cards called key cards that are shuffled in these decks. And when 4 such key cards have been drawn, they pretty much simply act as timers. Then the end of the game is triggered. You flip this card here, and the generic rat turns out it was just one of the aspects of the super mega villain of the game. And there are several of these villains. They all have the rat on the back, but different villains, different monsters on the other side. At that point, the last round is triggered. Each player gets a turn. They can take the turn normally, go to the village, go to the dungeon, do whatever they want. Or they can choose to attack the mega villain, which might be a way of getting a good number of points as a grand finale of the adventure. This done, player counter points, which may come from the experience points that they collected and they haven't spent upgrading and leveling up people, may come from the cards. You total all of the possible points, and at that point, the player with the highest score is the winner of the game. Yes, this is the best Thunderstone set to date. They keep improving. Maybe also because they don't come out like every 6 months with a new set. It's almost like Thunderstone has an explosion of interest, then it lays dormant for a while, and when it comes back, it feels so fresh and new. Maybe also because of that calendar, that schedule of releases. But whatever it is, I had a blast playing Thunderstone Quest. Again, I hadn't played the original Thunderstone or Thunderstone Advance in a while. It helped me reconnect with the joy of Thunderstone, with questing, adventuring, forming a party of heroes, etc., etc. It took some of the improvements that were made over the years, such as, for example, the option of preparing, and incorporated them, and that, of course, is a very wise idea. One of the problems of the original Thunderstone is that very often you would have a hand of cards that was like 1 card from being excellent, but as it was useless. With the option, if that happens, then you choose the best cards of the present hand, you save them from the next turn, and you have more control than in most deck building games on what you get next turn. So we had that in Thunderstone Advance, we have it here, and that is great. Then, of course, the most prominent element here is the dungeon. Now we can explore. Now we get much more of a dungeon crawler feel, of a board game feel. Even the board, the village, although you are just selecting actions, after some 20 years that you have been playing worker placement games, even that is interesting. Even that doesn't just feel like you're tracking actions, which you are, but it gives again a more board-based feel to it, more of a spatial sense. You have the wilderness that actually represents as you're moving from the village to the dungeon. All these little touches really give flavor to the theme, which is important. Again, the deck building engine has been around for a while now. We've had many iterations, but here with this excellent art, with this fun theme, with this implementation that makes the theme particularly perspicuous, particularly visible, then I think Thunderstone again stands out in the large range of deck buildings that we have as the one or one of the ones with the strongest thematic element. Also, the fact that we have a campaign, we have a story. Now, Thunderstone is following this new tradition, that was opened by Legacy Games, and is more and more common, of creating a narrative through gameplay. It's so common today that we almost sometimes forget how recent the idea is. Like 20 years ago, no one expected to have a story told through 20 sessions of a board game. We're gamers, yes, but they were role-playing gamers too, but those are strange people. Kidding, I happen to be both. So we have a campaign that continues if you decide to play that way. Basically, when you open the box, the cards will be sealed in little boosters, I can't think of the word right now, little envelopes, little plastic packages. They're in shrink. Okay, clamps of cards are in shrink and they're labeled, and you're told, and you have the scenario box or scenario 1, and you're told open those ones, and you play with those. Then later the story continues, you open another little clamp of cards in shrink, and you continue the story with new cards. Differently from Legacy, you're not instructed to destroy the cards, you save them. So when you're done with the campaign, you will have this pretty considerable collection of Thunderstone cards that you can play to design your own scenarios, or you can use randomly and just set up a random scenario. This variety, the longevity that the game gets from the number of components is relevant. To me, a game that is, say, 5 times as big as another one has in gameplays more than 5 times the gameplay, because if you're not using all of the components that come with the game, you're just selecting some each time, then of course different sessions of play will be very different from one another. You may play a lot of games here without seeing the same item or the same monster twice. Maybe the same item, yes, but the same monster or the same heroes twice, and those really are the ones that matter the most. Very different heroes with different abilities, different synergies, and figuring out the synergy between the hero and the available items and spells, of course, is part of the fun. The first player to figure that out and start that, and also who starts working towards it, is gonna have an advantage. So gameplay, so the theme is strong, stronger than any deck building game has any right to have. It really feels almost like, I don't say a role-playing game, but it feels like an actual dungeon crawler, while it is in fact a deck building, and for that reason it is abstract mechanically, but it works thematically. But gameplay is very compelling to me. What I really, really like also is the fact that you have a more fluid, smooth transition from your sucky deck at the beginning. It's okay if you start with a really boring, pointless, weak deck that you will be ashamed of soon, and you end up with an epic monster deck in which you have these powerful heroes that do crazy stuff. They summon creatures, they turn into other creatures, they work together to cast anything and everything. It really has this epic feel. But what I like is, again, how smooth and fluid the transition is. Sometimes in earlier versions of Thunderstone, or in general in deck building games, you get stuck with your weak deck for most of the game until, whoa, then you have 3 turns in which you are destroying everything. Here, the fact that you can upgrade your 0 level heroes into level 1 hero, I was afraid it was going to be overpowered based on the earlier version of Thunderstone, but it wasn't, because my impression here is that the level 1 heroes are a little weaker than the ones in the previous sets, and that's my impression. I haven't done any calculation, I haven't tabulated things. But my impression is that this way, your adventurers don't become superheroes right away, but they are not entirely green, they are not complete just new recruits. They're already doing something, they're already, if nothing else, gaining a little bit of thematic flavor. Now one is a rogue, and one is a wizard, and one is a cleric, and they get to do something, and then on level 2 they get stronger, level 3 they become really powerful, etc, etc. So it seems to me that, like, pretty much from turn 1, if you get two adventurers and two daggers, you can go and kill the vermin, and you can already level up one of your heroes into a from 0 to level 1 that has a profession, has a little bit of a special ability. That is interesting. That is fun. You are getting into interesting gameplay options right away, and to me that is really, really good. The art is great, the presentation is great, production values are great. Absolutely. I'm sorry if I'm repetitive in all of my, Thunderstone reviews, but this is the best Thunderstone set to date. This is definitely for the quality of gameplay, for the quality of the components, and the size, again, because the size matters in gameplay, because it gives you more options, it makes gameplay richer with more variety. Because of all these things, this is the best Thunderstone set to date to me. I really like pretty much everything that was added to the system. I love the fact that now it really feels like my hero is going down a dungeon and is really fighting those monsters and sneaking past some monsters to target other ones. I really feel that I'm going to the village, and this time I'm seeing the temple, and this time I'm visiting somebody else. It really has thematic flavor, and you know probably from my reviews that I like themes in games, I like narratives in games. Thunderstone Quest has both of these things in much larger doses than other Thunderstone sets, and most deck building games have. So highly recommend Thunderstone Quest. Absolutely a great set.